All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light, the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me,' because he was before me. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." Oh, but for the good old days, back when God was seen everywhere, in a pillar of fire, in a pillar of cloud, in a burning bush, or perhaps in an angel that was wrestled with all night long. Back in the good old days, God was seen everywhere. God kept showing up, and the people couldn't even seem to get away from God, even at times when they wanted to, because they were quite disturbed by the presence of God. God showed up in the wind, and even to Elijah in the silence on a mountain. All of these inexplicable ways, but yet very perceptible, God showed up to the people back in those Old Testament days. But today, we read passages about God becoming flesh and dwelling among man, something that seems more tangible than these apparitions that happened in the past. But yet somehow God seems less and less present. Harder to find, harder to see. Elizabeth Gilbert is an author. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love. She wrote a recent book on creativity. And she talks about the idea of multiple discovery. Now, I've mentioned before this idea that genius was not something that was attributed to somebody back in the past, right? Somebody wasn't considered a genius. They were considered to have a genius, or a muse, or a daemon. It was believed that these spirits almost would visit people with these great ideas. They'd come out of nowhere, and should somebody accept them and decide to give birth to them, whether it's in the form of music or written word or written art, then those things would come into being. But there were also times when the person would keep procrastinating and put it off and put it off. And so Gilbert believes that sometimes those muses would just keep on going and find somebody else who was willing to give birth to that idea, whatever it might be. In her idea of multiple discovery, she says that she believes that sometimes these muses will visit more than one person at a time. Perhaps they'll spend some time with this person, and then go on to this person, or maybe simultaneously be with two people. Gilbert's was at a discussion panel with another woman, and Ann Patchett, another author, and they were discussing the art of writing and the publishing industry and all of these things in this open forum. And they found that they really, really were attracted to each other in that they respected each other so much. They found each other to have a lot of integrity, a lot of creativity, a lot of wonderful character traits. And so they became good friends. But because they lived so far away, they didn't get to see each other very often. Maybe once every half a year or something like that. And one day, they were sitting down having lunch together. And Elizabeth was telling about her latest book that she was working on. It was a novel about a spinster, as she called her, from Minnesota, who was in love with her married boss and knew that she could never do anything about it and would never try. But the boss's son was kind of wily, kind of sketchy. And so he convinced his dad to bet on this construction project down in the Amazon. And so the son would convince his dad to send him down there once they won the bid and to take care of the project. But the son took all the money from the project and disappeared. And all of the equipment just sat there and went to waste in the Amazon jungle. And so the boss sent his spinster secretary down there to find his son and to bring him back. Now, as Anne is listening to this, her mouth is hanging open, and she throws out a few words that I can't say here in church. And Elizabeth says, "What? What's your book about?" She says, a 40-something-year-old spinster from Minnesota who goes down to the Amazon because she's in love with her boss, and he sends him down there because of this crooked project, and all things go to heck. And she's like, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now?" They had almost the exact same idea. The only difference was in Anne's book, it was an insurance company. But it was an insurance company that was insuring a construction project in the Amazon. Now that's just weird. But it just goes to show that these ideas, they come out of nowhere. I mean, they're so hard to explain. Look at these passages that we read today. These scriptures, you might have noticed, are not narratives. They're not stories. They don't tell us about something that happened in sequential order. Each and every one of those things, the thing that they all have in common is they're all hymns. This John 1 passage was an ancient hymn that used to be sung in the church. It wasn't a narrative passage. The passage from Sirach, the passage from the Book of Wisdom are all hymns, odes to creation, to wisdom, to the Logos, the Word that was always there since the beginning and was given life to human beings because it put on flesh. So then we start to get this idea that maybe God does appear to people, but it's just in a very different way than what we thought it was back in the Old Testament. For the service, Fran and Amanda were asking me about which song to sing, since today is Epiphany, and should we go with the Three Kings, or should we go with something else? And I had no intention whatsoever of even talking about Epiphany, because we just do the same stuff every year, and But then it occurred to me, this is all about Epiphany. This is all about theophany. This is all about seeing God in so many places. That's what Epiphany is, right? We say, "Oh, I just had an epiphany." Well, yeah, okay. Somehow you intersected with the divine and something came to light if you chose to birth it and bring it to fruition. And where do these things come from? How do they come to existence? Think about a poem. We've read so many poems from Rumi or Rilke or Whitman that stirred us, even though we can't make any sense of it up here. You have to keep reading it, keep reading. What the heck does that mean? Somehow it stirs you, makes you want to cry or laugh or smile or do something, but intellectually you just can't quite get a grasp on it. It's like, I can't make any sense of this thing, but my God, does it move me? Right? That is because these people chose to give birth to creativity. They chose to put flesh on a godly idea. Think about Mozart when he was writing the Kyrie from his Requiem. Think about Beethoven's Missa Solemnis or the Moonlight Sonata or Tchaikovsky's Hymn of the Cherubim or any of those. They weren't sitting there thinking, okay, I have to set up a 4-5-1 and a 2-5-7 one chord progression, and I'm going to do inversions on the first and the third chords of every... That's not what they were thinking. That's what they did afterward when they edited it and put it together musically. But those ideas came from somewhere. They heard something. They felt something. A melody was born within them. It came from somewhere. Somewhere inexplicable. Because this genius, this muse, this Spirit of God came to them. And from that came an idea. Now we can say to ourselves, well, I'm not artistic. I can't write, I can't draw, I can't compose music. That's not what creativity is all about. Those are just some media in which creativity is expressed. What about sitting with your kids or your grandkids or somebody else's kids, right, and creating a sacred space in which to teach them the way that John just shared wisdom with us? Creating those sacred spaces is creativity. What if it's in the questions, the what ifs? What if we could feed everybody in Rogers Park? What if we could eradicate hunger? What if we could set up a mentoring program so that every child doesn't have to be fatherless or whatever the case may be? What if? And what if we're brave enough to birth those ideas into fruition? Something that was there since the beginning of time. The Spirit of God that hovered over the water. The divine Sophia that's spoken of in Proverbs 8 or in these passages, right? I appeared in a cloud of fire, and sometimes I appeared as such and such. Or the Logos. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, etc., etc. These are all the same thing. They're all just written in different languages, some in Greek, some in Hebrew, some expressed in the feminine, some expressed in the masculine, but they are all the same thing. The wisdom, the Spirit of God that existed since the beginning of time. And why is it that we're the only species that are capable of creating? Well, let's see. We have the image of God. And it's no wonder that we can create things that we can't even grasp intellectually, but that will move people to action, that will comfort people when they need it. This is Epiphany. But it doesn't end with the idea.